So we started with a more in-person approach. We started with a few events in the Bay Area, built a small community. Now it's grown up to 3,000 founders just in the Bay Area. Our community really helps in educating each other and figuring out where the real direction is. We got our first customer, understood their problems through these in-person conversations, and now we are grown up to 1 million ARR in over a year's time primarily
Amazing.
through these community-led events.
All right, Nijansh, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you on here. I think we met a couple weeks ago and had a great conversation, and I was super excited to hear about you and how you've gotten to this point in your career. And then also would love to learn a little bit more about Heizen because it's a very unique service offering.
Thanks, Matt. Great to connect again and excited to be in this conversation.
So tell me a little bit about your history and kind of how you fell into that role of, hey, let's build this service, this thing together, and what that service provides and why it's different.
So yeah, Nijansh based out of San Francisco. I'm a second-time founder, previously built in the education tech space, now building in the software services space. And my co-founders, they are second-time founders as well. And one thing which we realized during our first startup is building production quality software is still incredibly hard to build even after AI has come in. So, how do we automate a lot of stuff, leverage AI to make it faster, cheaper for anyone building? That was the intention when we started out. And over time, we have tuned our business model, all our products, all our services to make sure that we can, that it's much easier to build production quality software for anyone out there.
Yeah. So being a second time founder probably makes things a little bit easier. I mean, you kind of know what to expect, right? Of like, hey, this part might be a little bit more difficult than others, but has there been one or two things that's been fundamentally different this second time around?
Right. So it's never been easy to start a company, but I think what becomes easier is you start becoming more comfortable with experiments. You become okay with failing fast. You don't take it too hard. You are more open to customer feedback and building good feedback loops. That has become easier, but all things have completely changed. I think after AI has come in, especially for founders, like the product cycles have release cycles have been become much shorter. There are multiple other use cases people are exploring, so there's an entirely different world out now to build.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love how you mentioned feeling comfortable with failing, right? And
Right.
experimenting. AI, of course, has really accelerated that.
Right.
There's always about a bajillion different ideas and things, and now you can actually implement some of them very,
Right.
very quickly. I love that a little bit more. So, professional services and especially outsourced engineering, that's been around for decades now. And
Right.
so, let me ask you, why did you land on that space to go into, and how is it different?
Initially, when we started off with this idea, we were with the vision of making production quality software easier. We started with any other no code, vibe coding tools which exist these days, basically using AI to automate everything. That was the initial idea. And we quickly realized that it's not that stage where you can just give AI anything and it will churn out production quality software. Making the quality to that level where you can actually onboard users and scale it faster still requires a lot of human intervention. What we realized was there's two things. There's the inner loop of software development where you primarily just write code, and that's where AI has automated a lot of stuff. But what there's also exists an outer loop where companies spend most of the time. I mean by outer loop is there's planning, there's testing, deployment, security, all these issues where you require significant human judgment, and that's where a lot of value of human engineers comes in.
Mm,
So we want to maintain that quality and build software, keeping that loop where humans are adding more value and automating a lot of inner loop stuff like coding and test writing.
yeah.
That's where the services model came in, where we leverage the both of West worlds. There's human judgment and thinking, involved in designing the system, planning, and everything. But AI is leveraged to speed up things much faster and make it much cheaper for people to build.
Yeah. The goal is efficiency and
Right.
making things quicker with a smaller team. Sounds like you can control costs a little bit more, at least from, the perspective of, I know historically in the past, whenever I would engage with an outsourced development team, you get scope creep, the project changes, things just happen. It's just the nature of it. And it was always kind of a pretty big range of, okay, it's going to be between $10,000 and $50,000 to do your project. And so Heizen has changed that.
I think, as you mentioned, outsourced software development has been existing for decades now. But what has changed with AI is there's a vast difference between companies which are AI native and not AI native. So previously, all these services business, we call it the economies of inefficiency. They were incentivized to work on billable hours, put in more resources, and charge for that. And that doesn't really align well with customers, where you're just charging for time and materials. What AI has done is you become more aligned to outcomes. So the incentives are now more aligned, getting value to the customer than just charging for them. So that's
Hmm.
where we come in. What we are doing is just charging for the products and the tools we build for our customers, not charging for the number of people deployed or how many hours it we're building.
I love that. And there's a pretty big shift in SaaS in general. People don't want the shiny features. They want the outcome, right? They're willing to pay for the outcome. And so you guys are already in the cutting edge of that, which is amazing. I think what's interesting is everyone says AI is killing agencies and service companies. I don't agree with that. I think it's really just exposing the ones that were already bad and inefficient. Um, so when you hear AI will replace dev shops, what do most people get wrong with that statement?
Yeah, so I think it's become a trend for the past 2 years. People say SaaS is dead or AI is killing dev shops. These are good hooks to build polarizing content online, but I think there's some truth to that, not completely true. What people mean when they say that dev shops are dead is that dev shops, as we know, wouldn't exist. The entire model of charging per hour or per resource, that wouldn't exist. There would be entirely different league of companies which would come in, has AI at the core, but are more aligned to customer outcomes and deliverables. So the previous model wouldn't exist. There would definitely be a need for these companies, but
Yeah.
they would work on an entirely different model and entirely different workflows.
How long do you think until that shift is really like the majority?
Uh, it- So there are definitely companies coming up, especially in the Bay Area in the US, but it will take a few years for companies to adapt because it will involve taking a hit on revenues, completely flipping the model which currently exists. Broader sectoral change would take a few years to come in, but customers are realizing that they're demanding more from their current vendors and even switching vendors if they are not able to align with these new
Yeah.
models.
Before AI showed up, what was already broken about the traditional services model? You touched on the fact of throwing resources at it, but what else was broken? I'm trying to paint the picture for those that don't really understand. What was the before state, and now after AI, which AI has not, as we know it, been around for very long, what's the after state? So I think it'd be interesting to dig into both of those.
Yeah, the primary thing that was broken was the incentives were underlined. The company is looking for more outcomes, efficiencies, getting their products out of the door. But on the agency or the dev shop side, they were more aligned to increasing their revenues through deploying more people, signing months of contract when they can just deliver in a few months, weeks. So AI has really exposed this model where if you are generating code instantly and the timelines are much shorter, even 10 times shorter, you don't have to charge for months in advance. So that has primarily changed now that you can't work on a time and materials model right now. You have to make it more aligned towards what customers require.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a really big shift.
Right.
It's similar to other service companies going away from hourly billing to flat fee fixed rate billing. Like, oh, you
Right.
want this service, it costs this much. Hopefully there's enough margin built in there so that everyone wins. But so yeah, that's really interesting. A lot of service companies are headed that direction. And it's probably, would you say that AI is really helping facilitate that? If we didn't have AI, would that transition still naturally happen?
As you get more tools and software to basically move much faster and automate a lot of workflows, that shift would take a lot more time. But AI has really augmented that, expedited that timelines much faster. Now you can think of these models. It has really shifted not just the workflows, but entire business models where people are working.
Yeah. What I love how you guys are viewing AI and using AI, you're not viewing it as a replacement,
Right.
but you're viewing it as a force multiplier. How can I make this one human individual 3x, right? And I think that's unique. There's a lot of companies viewing it as how can I replace humans, replace jobs with AI? And I think that's wrong. The approach that you guys have is how do we leverage those people, those humans, and the skills and things that they're really good at? And you mentioned some of that earlier in this show. How can we free them up to do more of that? How did you guys get to that conclusion?
Right. So, how do we imagine future teams? Previously, we had specialist engineers, front-end engineer, back-end engineer, someone doing design. All those had specialized roles. We imagine the future would be a team of generalist engineers who manage the entire workflow end to end. They think of the system architecture and manage all these agents which are specialized. It starts with a product manager agent which helps you plan all the sprints, then goes to a coding agent, testing agent, DevOps. All these agents are in a team but managed by a human who manages the entire workflow end to end. So we see AI not as a replacer for these engineers, but helps them graduate to a much better role where they are more involved in the thinking and the system design, and all the tasks or the manual labor is done by these agents.
I love that. Are you guys finding that those engineers are happier? Like they're feeling like they enjoy their work a little bit more because of that?
Definitely, I think a lot of engineers love coding. There's still find that process to be engaging. But what has it done is they can now work on a much broader set of problems, not just spending their days in writing code. They can figure out new ways to solve a problem which existed for a long time. They have gotten much more agency in terms of the gamut of work they can do. So previously, if a front end developer was primarily working on the website, now they can see the product end to end. How is the back end working? How is the front end working? How is it working in production? What are the issues? And use that feedback loops to improve on the product. So they are more working with the customer right now than just focusing one particular aspect of the product.
Yeah, so it's removed some of the silos that
Right.
existed before with your example of the expertise of, a lot of times the front end developer has no idea about
Right.
the back end. And so yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So there's this concept of fake AI and what that looks like in services. Can you just touch on that a little bit? I'm curious.
Right. So fake, different people have different meanings, but what's happening in the industry in general is people are using off-the-shelf AI tools and just improving their productivity using the same model, same workflows which existed, and that leads to an incremental improvement in in the quality and the speed of work. But when some team or company is AI native, what it means, the benefits of AI are translated to the business model as well, like how your revenue model is, how's your margin looking like, how your teams are structured. You can't have the same roles and just use AI to see a 10x or even a 5x improvement. You have to restructure your entire hierarchy, your team structure, your revenue models, use AI as the core, and build workflows around it using AI tools in your current workflows.
Right. And you guys benefited because you had that AI native model in mind in the beginning, right?
Right.
So, which I would imagine makes things a lot easier versus, hey, I'm an established business with all these processes. How do I become AI native? And I think that's the question. You know, there's a lot of companies that are like, oh, yeah, we use AI. And it's like, okay, you're using it to supplement your existing process, but you haven't actually adopted it. So, any tips or helpful things that you could share of how do you become AI native as an organization?
Right. I think there are two different answers to this. One is for people just starting out or building new teams. That's entirely different. And for enterprises or larger companies, they have entirely set of different needs. So for the first part, if you're starting out building a new team or a new company, it starts with the hiring process. You have to find native people. These are not people who have like 20 years of experience and they just learned something new in AI and they can use. AI native engineers, in our case, are entirely different group of people. They have learned AI. These are young people who have always seen workflows which start with AI. They are very comfortable speaking with agents. They run multiple agents at the back end and then combine all of it together and have a constant interaction with them. It starts with hiring the right people and structuring your team so that these work seamlessly. Ultimately, translating that into very specific outcomes. In our case, we keep a very sharp track on how much automation are we doing using agents, what is the human component, how our margins are affecting with this automation. Are we able to build much faster? To give you an example, if we are working with an enterprise, we start with a prototype first, not just a requirements document, but an actual prototype which companies can play around with and
Right.
see how they are seeing it. And then we build feedback loops on taking that prototype to production. Previously, something which existed only in decks or in documents, we actually give you a product on the first day itself and then iterate on that and give you something production quality. So this is an example of AI native workflow which exists.
Love that. About what if I'm already an established company
Right.
and I'm like, hey, how do I become AI native? You know, obviously I have hopefully some good people that already work for me. They hopefully are interested in AI.
Right.
Do I go find some new hires that are kind of AI native first and then sprinkle them in and help that with the culture? Or what advice would you give to a company that's already well on their way?
Right. Yeah, that's where we are helping a lot of companies. That's one of our core areas where we deliver value. For an established company and an enterprise, you have multiple functions. There are back-end functions, engineering, operations, marketing, sales, everything. So it starts with integrating AI in every department. How starting with what workflows can be quickly automated with AI at the core, then structuring the team around it. So to give an example, supply chain as an example, we are helping different companies automate those processes. You can use your existing tools, generate output from that, and put that into AI and generate a different output. But how an AI native workflow for a supply chain would exist is using all these data sources at in one control tower, a single source of truth. Build that as the core workflow, everything around it, and then producing all the outputs. So taking each of these processes, rethinking from scratch how would an AI native workflow exist, and then building the team around it. That's how we guide these companies to do that.
I love that. It's almost a giant engineering problem, right? Because you're defining that process and then you're
Right,
saying, okay, what part of this process can we actually automate and
right,
streamline and leverage more of the human activity that only humans should and can be doing? It really makes a lot of sense, you know, when you look at where a lot of the departments, I'm going to talk about marketing in particular,
right.
there's a pretty huge shift in how technical marketing leaders and people on the marketing teams need to be now, to the point of, you know, they've got go to market engineers that are coming in to look at those processes and streamline. So very fascinating. I love that. I love thinking through that and trying to share that knowledge with other companies. So, maybe Heizen doesn't just do software delivery. Maybe it's more fully baked in, and it sounds like you already are kind of enterprise. How do I help your org become AI native?
I think the real value of being AI native comes in with software. It has become much easier to run multiple experience experiments
Mm,
in parallel because it's much faster, but at a much lower cost.
yeah,
And that helps you solve a lot of existing problems which you previously had. So to talk about your marketing example, it's become much cheaper and easier to deploy a voice agent. You can do that in almost a week's time. See how it is if your revenue numbers or any other metrics you're tracking is going up, and run a different experiment the next week. It has become much cheaper and easier to run these experiments, and you can quickly see ROI of these AI initiatives.
yeah, yeah. I love that. So, because this is a podcast about growth, we're talking about growth
Right.
using AI and native AI. How have you guys grown, Heizen? Because you have customers and you're growing. What what have you found that's been working great for you guys? What have you tried that hasn't really worked? Looking into 2026, what are some of the unique experiments that you're excited about?
So I think we started at a time where people were still figuring out what to do with AI and what are different use cases, what can we actually build. So we started with a more in-person approach. We started with a few events in the Bay Area, built a small community. Now it's grown up to 3,000 founders just in the Bay Area. We have hosted
Wow.
events in New York during Tech Week. That channel has really worked for us because in these channels we really just help in software, but navigating the entire ecosystem of building. What are the different tools available? How you can, what are the ROIs you can expect? These kind of conversations, a community helps in educating each other and figuring out where the real direction is. We got our first customer, understood their problems through in-person conversations, and now we are grown up to 1 million ARR in a over a year's time through these,
It's
primarily
amazing.
through these community-led events. That's our
That's that's
primary
amazing.
channel. Right.
So let me get this straight. You guys have found it effective to sell a product that helps optimize humans, right? And some would say replace some of their jobs by building in-person relationships. I love that because it's, they're kind of counter of each other a little bit, which
I think two factors primarily drove this in 2023. We just came out of the pandemic. People were hungry for in-person connections. Then secondly, people were still figuring out a lot of things, what to do, what to build. So both of these factors, people really enjoy these in-person conversations. And for the next year, we are scaling this up, doing a lot of in-person engagements across the US, where we'll invite people, even for enterprises, larger companies, educate them on what problems they can really solve with tech right now.
that's great. I love hearing about in-person events are tough, like they are. Like it's not an easy thing to scale. So I love that you guys are leaning into those and finding a ton of success. Who is your ideal customer?
So we started last year with early stage founders looking for products to build. We have been working with startups across the Bay Area, across the US, in helping them build something where they can onboard users, scale it up, and raise money. That has been really helpful in building platform maturity and testing whether this model is scalable or not. And we have scaled this model, so that has answered a lot of questions. Now we are moving towards enterprises, helping teams within these enterprises solve problems. Larger companies struggle with getting good ROIs from these initiatives. They don't have internal expertise. They really are not sure where to invest in. So we help them quickly run these experiments, see the value of AI and these new systems, and then invest in a longer term contract. Right now, our ideal customer is larger companies looking to invest in these new tools, custom built for them, where
Yeah.
it doesn't much disruption. And we're starting off with the consumer goods and retail companies, helping them optimize their supply chain. A lot of mid-market traditional companies, they don't have tech teams. But
Yeah.
now the economics of building software really makes sense because it is almost 80% cheaper and 10x faster for them.
Crazy.
Um, any
Yeah.
company looking to solve their problems like visibility across their supply chain, where are they sourcing their inputs from, compliance requirements, everything can be solved with using these new tech tools available.
Yeah. That's great. So you guys started with these early stage founders, which there's a bunch of people with ideas, call them the early adopters, right? Because they have a unique problem and they're probably came to you with, "Hey, here's my lovable, now make this work so I can actually turn it into enterprise level software and scale it." And then you've got traction there and said, "Hey, the larger opportunity is up market from there." Um, at what point was there a certain signal or a certain thing that made you guys say, "Hey, we need to push a little bit more up market," or did it just kind of naturally happen?
Right. As we closed 1 year of founding this company, we were doing more than 20 sprints in 1 month with
Wow.
this model and maintaining a
100,
good margin.
120 sprints.
Yeah,
Wow, that's impressive.
right. And keeping the economics, I think the impressive part is keeping the economics, maintaining a good margin on these deliveries with the kind of talent we have, with the kind of automation we baked in these workflows. Since we are delivering this model, we realize that this can be expanded to enterprise companies as well. Speaking with a few initial customers, we realized that they were looking for these type of solutions. They are willing to invest because they are seeing early stage startups benefit out of it. Why can't enterprises, larger companies, Fortune 500 companies, benefit? They have internal teams working on these products, but there's so much to do. There's an entire greenfield of opportunities available. Even mid-sized companies can leverage tools. So we realize that this is a good market to go after.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Nijansh, as we wrap up here, I'd love to ask for your closing advice. My question is, what advice do you have for founders in regards to what should they stop doing immediately when it comes to AI? They
I think
stop doing.
they should stop primarily using vibe coded or initial prototypes, figure out what the customer needs, then build a prototype, give it to them, see whether they'll like it or not, and then make it production quality. Start with the customer first, use AI to build solutions for them, not just building a solution and figuring out where it sells.
Yeah. That's great advice. It's easy to get excited to build stuff, right? Because it's
Right.
so easy now. But that's solid advice. Talk to the customers or potential customers if you don't have customers, figure out what they need, then build it and get it in their hands and see if it takes off. I love that. Before we go, how does someone learn more about Heizen?
Right. You can always visit our website, Heizen.work. There's a link to book a call. Happy to speak if you're building something. And if you're in the Bay Area or in the East Coast, look out for our events. Happy to meet in person as well.
Great. Najance, thank you so much for being on the show and best of luck to you. And it's fantastic.
Thanks, Matt. Hope people could find some good points to work on from this podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.